Obsidian ships with a bunch of core plugins, and some are definitely more useful than others. But figuring out which ones are actually worth using can be a little bit overwhelming. So in this video, we're gonna share a complete tier list that will help you build a lean, powerful Obsidian setup that actually supports your thinking instead of getting in the way. Now, if you're unfamiliar with how tier lists work, it's basically a subjective ranking of things broken down into ranked groups. The highest rank is the S tier, which is basically the best of the best. These are the plugins that I use every day or I can't live without. And following that S tier is the A tier, which are excellent plugins that are very useful and I use frequently. The B tier, which is plugins that are useful but I don't use all the time. The C tier, which is plugins that are decent but I could honestly probably live without. The D tier, which are plugins that I don't find all that useful. And then finally F tier at the very bottom, which are plugins that I think are pretty pointless. Now keep in mind, these are subjective rankings. In other words, this tier list represents my opinion. And I'm basing this on how useful I think each plugin is for the average Obsidian user who's looking to dial in their PKM system to help them get more out of their notes and ideas. So each core plugin definitely has a spot in specific workflows. And the beauty of Obsidian, in my opinion, is that you can turn on the ones that you want and disable all the rest. So all that to say that you may have reasons why a particular core plugin may be ranked higher or lower than the rank that I share here. And honestly, your tier list should look a little different than mine. But in this video, I'm gonna share my tier rankings for all of the bundled core plugins, as well as the reason why I gave each plugin that particular rank. All right, so let's get into the rankings. I'm gonna go in alphabetical order, just like the plugins are listed in the Obsidian settings. So up first is the audio recorder plugin. This plugin lets you record audio using the system microphone while you're using Obsidian. You can start the recording either by clicking the button in the ribbon or by running the Start Recording Audio command via the command palette. But aside from the ribbon icon turning a light shade of purple, there is zero indication that the audio is actually recording. Once you click the button to stop or use the Stop Recording Audio command, then the file automatically gets embedded into your Obsidian note. Now I get why this would be useful when taking notes in meetings or lectures, but my issue here is that it's very easy to forget that you have this plugin running. The audio recordings themselves sound nice and the player interface is okay, but this is a pretty quick way to fill up space on your device. And if you want to remove the files, you have to go into the attachments folder and manually delete them. And if you really want to attach audio files to a note in Obsidian, I would recommend you use something else like Whisper Memos or Super Whisper or some version of audio plus transcription. That way you get the full text, plus you can always attach that separate audio file to a note in Obsidian later. So this plugin is a good idea, but honestly, I don't think it's very useful. It's not a great way to kick off this tier list, but I believe this is an F tier plugin and I don't recommend that you use this one. All right, so now we've got nowhere to go but up as we consider the next plugin, which is the Backlinks plugin. Now, backlinks are one of the key features of a connected notes app like Obsidian, and this one is incredibly useful. So when you toggle this plugin on, it adds a backlinks tab to the right sidebar, which automatically updates based on your active note. This makes it easy to discover connections between your notes, which is a pretty critical PKM feature. You can also add backlinks to the bottom of your note by running the toggle backlinks in document command. And there is a single setting for this plugin that allows you to automatically show those backlinks in new tabs. Personally, I think this plugin is very useful, though I don't use it all the time. And that means that backlinks for me is a solid B tier plugin. The next plugin on the list is also the newest, that's the Bases plugin. And this plugin lets you create database-like views of your notes, a lot like Notion does, but it still just sits on top of a folder full of markdown files. Bases can be standalone files, which have a visual indicator in the File Explorer to indicate the .base file format, or embedded in your notes using code blocks, and use different views to edit, sort, and filter files based on their note properties. There are lots of ways to use Bases. Some of my favorites are to show a list of previous daily notes that match the day and month, kind of like an On This Day feature, and a card view collection of all my personal book notes, which I actually have available for download if you're interested at practicalpkm.com/notes. It's impossible to describe here everything that Bases is capable of, but the short version is that Bases is a game changer for Obsidian users. It does a lot of what the Data View community plugin did, but it does it better and it does it faster. I'm actually working on a longer video, which is a complete guide to Bases, but for now, just know This plugin is incredible, easily an S tier plugin for me. The next plugin on the list is the Bookmarks plugin. This plugin adds a Bookmarks tab in the left sidebar and works a lot like a Bookmarks manager in your web browser, letting you quickly access parts of your vault by creating links to them and storing them in this tab. There are several types of things you can bookmark in Obsidian, including notes, headers, folders, search terms, graph views, even specific blocks from your notes. You can create folders or groups of your bookmarks to keep them organized, and clicking on a bookmark instantly takes you to that spot in your vault. It's a fairly simple plugin, but it's really useful, which makes this a B tier plugin for me. The next plugin is the Canvas plugin, which, like the Bases plugin, introduces a new file type to Obsidian that can be seen in the File Explorer when looking at the notes in your vault. A canvas file is basically an infinite canvas that you can use for visually laying out your notes, attachments, and web pages. There are a couple of things I love about Canvas. First, the contents of your notes are displayed when you zoom in close enough. But you can also embed code blocks in Canvas cards without creating new notes in your vault, which is what I use for all of the dashboards that I built for Life HQ. I have dashboards for habit tracking, my daily question scores, even a task dashboard that gives me an overview of things that are due this week, this month, unprocessed, etc. Canvas is a deceptively powerful plugin, but once you understand what it's capable of, it can transform your Obsidian vault. This is another S tier plugin for me. The next plugin is the Command Palette. This is likely one of the first Obsidian features that you learn about, but it also has several features that aren't blatantly obvious, which leads to it being very underrated in my opinion. For example, when you invoke the Command Palette using Command P on Mac or Control P on Windows, you get a text box where you can start typing the name of any of the available commands in Obsidian. But you can also type the name of an installed plugin to quickly find the new actions that were added when you added that plugin. And any hotkeys that are assigned are also available in this list. As of version 1.8.3, the list of commands here also shows the most recently used near the top using fuzzy logic. But you can also pin commands in the settings for this plugin so that specific commands always show up at the top. I really don't think this is necessary since the autocomplete helps you filter things pretty quickly, but it can be helpful as a visual reminder. This might be the plugin that I use the most in Obsidian, but it doesn't quite get to the level of Bases or Canvas in terms of new functionality. It's more of a solid foundational plugin that I use every day. So I'm going to put this one in the A tier. Next plugin on the list is Daily Notes, which I consider to be another essential Obsidian feature. This plugin creates a new note for each day, hence the name Daily Notes. And while there are a million ways you can use these daily notes, I like to use them primarily for digital journaling. You can create a template file and use date tokens that automatically get rendered in the appropriate format when the daily note is created, which lets you do some interesting things with your template file. For example, I have a section embedded in a callout which pulls in my daily Bible readings, shows the tasks that are due, logs my completed habits, scores my daily questions, even displays previous daily notes that share the same day and month. The only thing missing from this is the calendar view, which I feel should be included out of the box like it is in NotePlan. But overall, this is a killer plugin that I use every single day. This is easily an A tier plugin for me. The next plugin is File Recovery, which is kind of like a built-in backup feature for your vault that lets you roll back recent changes by loading a previous version of a file. In the settings for this plugin, you can set the snapshot interval in minutes, the history length in days, and both of these will significantly impact how much space is eaten up by your device, so you'll want to find the sweet spot here. I use the default 5-minute intervals and 7 days of history, and you can load a snapshot to see the changes and roll back as needed. It's not a true backup solution, so you'll likely want to use another backup service like Backblaze, for example, that's the one that I use, to make a real backup of the notes that are in your vault. But it is handy, and this is a B tier plugin for me. The next plugin is Files, which is basically the File Explorer, and it shows a hierarchical view of all your notes and folders in the left sidebar. All of the folders are displayed first, and then all of the notes inside of your root vault folder are listed below. Turning this plugin off feels really weird as it removes the ability to navigate your vault hierarchically, but I do know a few people who prefer it that way, so if that's you, it's kind of nice that you have the ability to turn this off. Otherwise, this is one that you wouldn't even really notice because it's a natural part of how we manage files and folders, and it doesn't really add anything new. So this is a D tier plugin for me. The next plugin is Footnotes View. And this is a fairly new plugin that shows the footnotes from the active note in the right sidebar in addition to the bottom of the active note. It's a pretty simple plugin that solves a big problem for writers who use a lot of footnotes in their writing, making it easy to visualize the footnotes without having to scroll all the way down to the bottom of the note. It's a useful plugin, but it's not exactly life-changing, so I'm gonna make this one a C tier plugin. The next plugin is Format Converter, and this plugin helps you convert imported files from other apps into Obsidian flavored Markdown. This is most useful when importing notes from another app like Roam Research or Bear, but it can also be useful in updating your notes in Obsidian from the old deprecated property formats into the current versions supported for tags, aliases, and CSS classes. The latter is more useful to me, as I actually don't generally recommend bringing everything over from your previous notes app when getting started with Obsidian. But even if I did, this plugin has limited usefulness, as it's something that you really just use once. If you can't already tell, I'm not a big fan of this one. Only the ability to update from old property formats saves this plugin from the F tier, but still, this is a D tier plugin at best. The next plugin is Graph View. And I'm of two minds on this one, as I love the local graph and I keep it in the lower half of my right sidebar. This helps me see all of the notes that are linked from or linked to the active note, helping me discover new connections as I navigate my notes. But the big graph view, I think, is kind of useless. It looks cool, but I never find myself going back to that graph view for any useful purpose. And yes, I know you can create groups and have different colors for things, but I still don't think it's all that useful, especially as your vault grows to include thousands of notes. Now, maybe if you kept your vault really small, this would be more useful, but personally, I like having all my notes in one vault so I can make connections across different domains. So the local graph is insanely valuable. To me, that's what elevates this plugin into the B tier. The next plugin is the Note Composer. I actually like this one a lot, though its usefulness is not evident until you start to break down your longer notes into smaller atomic notes. So this plugin allows you to highlight text and then rip it out of the current note, create a new note from that selected text, and then either link or embed the new note in the old file. You can also use this to combine notes, but I don't really think that is nearly as useful. But since a lot of insight can be wrung from linked atomic notes, I think this is one that every Obsidian user should get familiar with. This is another B tier plugin for me. The next plugin is Outgoing Links, and this is the bookend to the Backlinks plugin mentioned earlier, but instead of showing all the notes that link to the active note, it shows all the notes that the current note links to. It's basically links that go the other way, though both of these are visible in the local graph when you stick it in your sidebar. So it's not quite as useful, in my humble opinion, as the Backlinks plugin for discovering connections, so this is a C tier plugin for me. The next plugin is Outline, which gives you an outline view of the headers in the current note in your right sidebar. This one looks pretty simple, but it's actually pretty powerful. In addition to jumping to a specific section of the note by clicking on the header in the outline, you can also drag items in this outline to reorder the sections in the active note. I've long said Obsidian is underrated as an outlining app, and this core plugin is one reason why. This is a B tier plugin in my opinion. The next plugin is Page Preview. This plugin lets you preview a page when you hover the cursor over an internal link without needing to navigate to that page. You can use page previews for all sorts of things in Obsidian, and the plugin settings let you choose whether the preview loads when you hover over the link or whether you need to hold the command key instead. I prefer to use the command key for almost everything, but I do find this plugin useful occasionally, and this is a C tier plugin. The next plugin is Properties View. Now this is not the same thing as Properties, which can be added to the top of a note by using 3 dashes. Instead, this plugin creates 2 new views in the right sidebar. One shows File Properties and gives you a list of all the properties for the active note. The other is All Properties, which shows you a list of all the properties in your vault and their type. The File Property view I think is kind of useless. I usually just manage properties for the note in the note itself. But the All Properties view is handy, and it allows you to right-click on a property and either rename it or change its type. And that change applies across your entire vault. Now, properties themselves are incredible, but you actually don't need this plugin in order to use those in your notes. So that makes this plugin a B tier plugin for me. The next plugin is Publish, which allows you to publish your notes to the web directly from your Obsidian vault. It does require a separate Publish subscription, which is currently $8 US per month, but it's worth it in my opinion if you want a frictionless way to publish your notes to the web. Now, one of the things that I love about Publish sites is the ability to include that local graph view. It gives you a view of all the notes that link to and link from the active note, even when you view that file on the web. I also like how you can password protect your site if you want to keep your notes private, and publishing new or updated notes from your vault is incredibly easy. This plugin is not for everyone, but for those who need it, it's a phenomenal service at a reasonable price, which makes this an A-tier plugin in my opinion. The next plugin is Quick Switcher, which lets you search for and open notes using only your keyboard. You can access the Quick Switcher by hitting Command-O on Mac or Control-O on Windows. Then you just start typing the name of the note that you want, select it from the list, and hit Enter to open it. You can also hold the modifier key while hitting Enter to open the note in a new tab, and if the note doesn't exist yet, Quick Switcher gives you the fastest way to add it, as you can just type the title of the note and then hit the Enter key to create it in your vault. It's not quite to the level of the command palette, but still an insanely useful plugin and incredibly underrated in my opinion, so this is a B-tier plugin for me. The next plugin is Random Note. This adds a button in the ribbon that you can use to open a random note within your vault. The help site says this is to help you rediscover notes and add new insights or link to recently added notes, but honestly, I don't see the point of this one. Personally, I'm not a fan of making random connections just for the sake of connecting things. I believe that when it comes to connections in your notes, each connection should mean something. You want to create intentional connections, not just links for whatever happens to pop up. So this is another F-tier plugin for me, as I really don't think this one gives your PKM system any practical value. The next plugin is Search. It'd be kind of weird not to have a search feature inside of an app like Obsidian, so I have no idea why you might turn this one off, but the search plugin itself is actually pretty powerful. You can open a search in the left sidebar or embed a search query in your notes, like I've done with my quotebook and journal entries. You can even use regular expressions in those search queries. The only thing I don't like about this is that the results are pretty ugly by default, which is why I use the beta query control plugin to render the results of my queries as markdown for my embedded queries. Still, this one's pretty useful. This is a B-tier plugin for me. The next plugin is slash commands, and this is kind of a different way of accessing the commands via the command palette by using a slash at the beginning of any line or blank space. Now, honestly, I don't know what this plugin gets you that the command palette doesn't give you already, except maybe a minor speed boost, as you only need one key to trigger it instead of two. I use slash commands in other apps, but still I almost never use this in Obsidian, as the command palette is just so good. And overall, I'd recommend you crease that muscle memory. You get used to using the command palette instead if you're really trying to get this ingrained. I can see how this might be easier for some people, but it's a little redundant. So I'm gonna put this in the C tier. The next plugin is the Slides plugin. This lets you create a markdown presentation from your notes in Obsidian. Okay, look, I like the idea of creating a presentation using Markdown. I was a big fan of DeckSet back in the day for this very reason. But these presentations are not good. Just do not use this plugin, please. I get how you may want to just take your text and quick throw it on a screen, but that's not a good way to present information. Every book I've read on how to do a killer presentation talks about limiting the text on the screen, and that's really all this plugin is good for. There are so many better presentation tools out there. If you really need to present something, use something else. This is yet another F-tier plugin for me. The next plugin is Sync, which allows you to sync your notes across all your devices. Now, technically, you don't need the Obsidian Sync service in order to sync the notes in your vault. You can absolutely use something like Dropbox or iCloud instead, but I highly recommend the Sync service for a couple of reasons. First, it's end-to-end encrypted, so it keeps your data safe. Second, it has selective sync, so you can choose which folders you want to sync to which devices. So for example, I have over 50,000 notes on my computer, but I only sync about 6,000 of those to my mobile device because I have very specific ways that I use that device. It also gives you version history so you can go back and see what changed in your notes and the ability to restore deleted files. So at $4 a month, I think Sync is a bargain, and this is my recommended way to sync the notes in your vault. It's not quite S tier, but it's an easy A tier plugin in my opinion. The next plugin is Tags View. This lists all the tags in your vault and the number of notes for each tag. It also shows nested tags like the ones that I use for my daily journaling, and you can click on a tag to open a search for that tag in the left sidebar. This plugin is really useful, but it's missing a key feature in my opinion, which is the ability to right-click on a tag and rename it just like you can do with the Properties view. Now, fortunately, the Tag Wrangler plugin lets you do this, but it really should be baked into the app. So the combination of usefulness and that missing renaming feature makes this a C tier plugin for me. The next plugin is Templates. Now, personally, I think templates are kind of underrated in Obsidian as there's a lot you can do with template variables that aren't blatantly obvious, but even if you just use this for predefined snippets of text, it would still be insanely useful. I use templates all the time and I have a bunch of them included in my free Obsidian starter vault, which is available at vault.practicalpkm.com. But regardless of where you get your templates, I highly recommend you use this plugin. The template variables make this an A-tier plugin. The next plugin is Unique Note Creator. This plugin lets you create notes with time-based names following the Zettelkasten methodology. Look, this one just is not for me. I get why some people will love this, but this is not how I use Obsidian, and I don't think I'd recommend someone kicking the tires try to go down that Zettelkasten rabbit hole. My advice for someone new to Obsidian would be to start writing, break your notes apart into smaller atomic notes, and start making intentional connections between them. Zettelkasten for most people is unnecessarily complex, especially at the beginning, and the juice is probably not worth the squeeze. It's cool that this is here if you're a hardcore Zettelkastener, but everyone else who's using Obsidian as a notes or writing app, this is a D-tier plugin at best. The next plugin on the list is Web Viewer. This is a fairly recent plugin that lets you open external links within Obsidian on the desktop. This is great for researching as it lets you read link content without leaving the Obsidian app. It's not a full-on replacement for your web browser. It's actually kinda limited, but it does offer the ability to save pages to your vault and some basic ad blocking. I don't use this all that often, but it is occasionally useful to have a web page open next to a note in Obsidian. So this is a D-tier plugin for me. The next plugin is Word Count, which has quietly gotten quite a bit better over the years. This plugin displays the number of words and characters on the active note in the status bar. And now it's been updated to show the words and characters of the selected text when you highlight a specific section. It's not flashy, but it's very functional. And as a writer, I use this all the time. I think there are quite a few folks who may not care about this plugin at all, but for me, this is a C-tier plugin. The last plugin here is Workspaces. This plugin lets you manage and switch between different application layouts depending on your task. So for example, you may have one workspace for journaling, another for reading, another for writing. A workspace is basically a layout that contains information about open files and tabs and the width and visibility of each sidebar. You can save and load your workspaces from the command palette, but personally, I don't really use this. But I do get why this could be a really useful feature for some people. Personally, I'm jumping back and forth between my notes so often that I never really think about loading a specific workspace. That's just not how I navigate notes across the different domains in my Obsidian Vault. But it is pretty cool that you can create these presets. So I'm gonna put this one in the C tier. All right, so that's everything. Now just to recap, here's my full tier list starting from the top and working our way down. So in the S tier, we have bases and canvas. In the A tier, we have command palette, daily notes, publish, sync, and templates. In the B tier, we have backlinks, bookmarks, file recovery, graph view, note composer, outline, properties view, quick switcher, and search. In the C tier, we have footnotes view, outgoing links, page preview, /commands, tag view, word count, and workspaces. In the D tier, we have files, format converter, unique note creator, and web viewer. And finally, in the F tier, we have audio recorder, random note, and slides. Now, hopefully by explaining my rankings and sharing a little bit about each plugin, you've identified a couple of these that can help you upgrade your current Obsidian workflows. If you want to give your Vault an immediate upgrade, I do have a done-for-you Obsidian Vault that has not only the core plugins pre-configured, but also a bunch of community plugins and CSS snippets. All the settings are pre-configured for you for all of my values-based productivity workflows. They're all ready to go right out of the box. That vault is called LifeHQ. You can find out more about it at lifehq.practicalpkm.com. I've also got a free starter vault that I mentioned earlier, which has a bunch of additional tips, templates, and resources to help you get more out of your notes and ideas. You can download that for free by going to vault.practicalpkm.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in another video.